Good evening and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm Kevin Castley. Thank you for being here tonight. Tonight is the final of the 3 streams that I had planned to do this week dedicated to talking about nuclear policy and issues related to that. And with that, again, tomorrow, we will resume our normal sort of streams where we bring on guests, we talk about current events and whatnot. Tonight, it's not exactly a current event. This dates back to May and July of this year, though it's potentially still ongoing. But the articles that I could find on the matter dated back then. I was too busy then to really talk too much about it. But I think it's appropriate given the theme this week with everything. And so this is going to conclude the triple threat with these streams. I have, of course, the one talking about how America must expand her nuclear arsenal. I have one talking about how America should have been the only country to even be allowed to have a nuclear arsenal. And tonight we're going to be talking about nuclear testing and whether or not it makes sense to resume doing so. So again, thank you to every absolute based son of Cyrus. Thank you again for the donations. And thanks to the rest of the supporters and the rest of the patron gang and the PayPal gang. You guys are awesome. You guys rock. So you guys make these daily streams possible. So big up to you guys. Additionally, I just do as well just want to give a brief heads up to everybody that spamming cringe in the chat won't be tolerated. I'm not just gonna ban you or time you out if you're a troll or whatever. We have fun with the trolls. They add entertainment. They are a sideshow. They give the audience even more reason to come here and see us dunk on the trolls. So the trolls add value to the stream sometimes. But if you're just gonna spam and spam and spam, you're gonna be put in a timeout. Doesn't mean you're blocked or anything. It's just you're on notice. That's kind of the deal. That's how we do this. And yeah, that applies to patrons too. That applies to everybody. Nobody's above that because we have to keep in mind that we want this to be a meaningful and effective platform for everybody here. And you can't really just clog it up with spam. So so that's kind of how the policy works over here at Superpower Broadcasting. So we're going to get into the stream here. And like I said, we'll go back to the normal streams tomorrow where we bring on guests and everything. If you notice, I haven't really invited anybody because it's, there's a lot to say. And these are things that, I generally care quite a bit about. And, I have pretty controversial opinions here. And everybody wants to come and see me here and basically like talk about nukes and everything. So that's cool. So yeah, we're going to get into this. So what you're looking at on the screen right now, I've been playing around with filters and everything. Been trying out some neocon wave aesthetics lately. Been having a lot of fun with it. The actual photo that you're seeing right now, this is a false colorization. This is a neocon wave rendition of the actual footage. The real picture is this one right here, which in some ways is more spectacular. There's a lot more detail going on. I like this one. It really kind of highlights the immersion and the light in the distance, whereas this one here, there's a lot more sort of definition. This is from 1957, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the stream, but I think it's a really spectacular thumbnail to kind of encapsulate what we're going to be discussing tonight. And so there are a few elements to tonight's stream that I have planned out for you. The first is we're going to talk about the substance of Trump's consideration to, I would presume, temporarily lift the moratorium on nuclear testing in the United States. That's dated back since the early 1990s. Second, we're going to be talking a little bit about, well, whether or not it makes strategic sense, whether there's a net gain to be had there in doing so, and what are my views on that, and what are policy thinkers, what are their views on that. And then the third is going to be story time. That's one of the reasons why I hadn't invited anybody tonight, because we all love story time. We're going to be talking a bit about the history of the Nevada test site, how nuclear testing went in the past, back in the 1950s, early 1960s, and we'll kind of summarize a lot of stuff near the end. So it's a bit of a beefy stream in that sense. So Wyatt's here. Big up to base patron Wyatt. He says, I always want to hear about nukes. Absolutely, absolutely. So you're in the right place right now. We got millions of channels on YouTube, but you guys are here right now, so that's awesome. So Wyatt says, and of course, even though I'm not inviting any guests on, and even though this is a pretty planned out stream, I mean, a lot of them are kind of impromptu. We bring on the guests, we bring up different stuff, they bring things to the table. You never really know where it's going to go, but it's always a fun time. Tonight's a lot more planned out, but we still have the chat gang, and they also bring things to the table. So we will, of course, be addressing the chat, but for portions of the stream, of course, like in others, I close off the chat portion. I don't look at what you're saying. I catch up on that later so that I can concentrate on what I'm talking about. So Wyatt says, I remember isolationists were mad. Trump wanted to test nukes. Even if testing nukes is a way of staying safe, if you wanted to be an isolationist. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing because the arguments against, and we'll get into these, the arguments against doing it, and there are good arguments against doing it. There are good arguments against doing it. I think that there are two categories of arguments here. The first is the geostrategic argumentation of whether or not there's a net gain or a net loss to be had. The second, and I'm partly kind of memeing here, except not really, because it would be kind of cool, is imagine if we got 4K footage of a nuclear test, like an atmospheric one, just once, because all these are back to 1963. Just imagine 2020 or 2021, whenever he decides to give it a green light, we had actual 4K footage of it. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the stream. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, the argumentation against it, and we'll talk about that when we get to the argumentation portion of it, but they're not isolationists that are opposed to doing it. They tend to be more neoliberal minded people. They're more concerned about arms control. They're more concerned about creating an international community and whatnot. If you were an isolationist and you didn't care about the rest of the world, what argument would there be against doing the nuclear test? I don't really understand that. So I'm with Wyatt there 100%. So we have the work kettle here. Good morning from Cyprus. Oh yeah, and Jay's awesome. Jay and I, earlier on, not part of the triple threat, not part of the last three streams, but earlier on a few weeks ago, we watched some old declassified nuclear footage that the Russians put out because they finally released the Tsar-Bomba footage, which was pretty cool to see. So I like what Wyatt has to say. He says, easy way to get rid of nukes is blowing them up. Oh, man. Okay. We got a troll over here on Twitch. Hello, troll. How's it going? Yeah. Work Kettle says the footage was amazing. Actually, it was even more spectacular than the footage of the Tsar-Bomba because it was from, well, you can't really blame them. It was distant. It was grainy footage. The most artistic, I'm not going to say it was the most artistic nuclear test ever, but the way that the British filmed their H-bomb, the first H-bomb, was just, I mean, we talked about this before, but the Americans, they'd stand like 100 kilometers back, 140 kilometers back and show you it going off. The British were like, why don't we just basically fly right overhead? And there's video of that. You can watch it on the stream. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Or just type in, first British H-bomb. Put epic music over it. It's just, it's crazy, right? Now, they didn't actually go right over it. They had to immediately, upon dropping the bomb, bank hard to the left to get away from it actually literally exploding underneath them because they wouldn't have survived that. But they were only a few horizontal kilometers away when it went off. Where, I mean, I'm telling you, man, those footage, that footage is insane. He says we know how to film them. Yeah. Mexinator says, wish we had modern testing footage. No, that's a good argument for doing the test, and we'll get into that later on. But we're gonna go back. I like the filters. I like the neocon wave filters like this. I think it looks cool. This though, I mean, that's spectacular in and of itself. That's 1957 right there. But anyway, we'll go back to this one. I think it's spectacular, man. But where Kittle says he doxes himself all the time. So what's the deal with Trump? So like I said, this isn't exactly a current event. I would say it's more of an ongoing event since I haven't seen anything to indicate that Trump wasn't considering it anymore. But it came to light that back in May, it was revealed that Trump was considering. He was actually considering basically conducting nuclear tests. At least one. The text here basically says to test a nuclear explosion, but potentially more. You'll notice that if you actually look up the various operations that were done at the Nevada Proving Ground, a lot of them would have 20 or 30 or more detonations that were part of their lined up experiments. So it's possible that he would just do one. And I think that there's a good argument to be made. There are good arguments on both sides. I mean, memes aside and everything, there are good arguments on both sides here on why you should or shouldn't do it. And we'll discuss those. So tonight's going to be a rather, I won't say long stream because there are 7-hour streams on this channel, but it's not going to be as short as like a 40-minute sort of thing. So just to give everybody there a heads up. So feel free to share this to your friends and whatnot, because by the time they open the message, we'll still probably be live. So, and also be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. So Donald Trump, this is a Washington Post back in May that basically, they were arguing in Trump's camp, arguing that because Russia and China have been allegedly doing low yield testing, violating the ban, the moratorium, it wouldn't make any sense for the United States not to do testing as well, because there's value that you get from testing. It doesn't just look cool. You actually get scientific data from doing it. It's a way of proving that your stuff still works. It's a way of honing in and refining the caliber of what you have. And a lot of people would say, well, computer technology is such that at this point in this day and age, you can just model these explosions in computers and see how your stuff works. But do you really want to rely on your national security to computer simulations? I mean, I'm not saying you do 900 or 700 tests like they did back in the 1950s and 60s, but you might want to at least do one or two every now and then just to make sure that your models are operating on solid parameters, right? I mean, because computer modeling, man, it can be great, but I mean, it's predicted a lot of stuff that's just goofy, right? So you really need to be operating on a solid foundation, inputting proper parameters and everything. You want to make sure you know what you're doing there. And with a matter as important as the nuclear deterrent, yeah, I think, and we'll get into this a little bit later on in more detail, but I think it makes a lot of sense that every now and then you want to verify that your models are true to form with the real world, right? So now they didn't really do any computer modeling or anything here. It was just chalkboard equations and actual real life testing back in 57. But I mean, the computers back then, they had them. They were just absolutely cumbersome and not very effective. But so basically Trump is considering this. The allegation is that America's enemies are doing low yield tests. Now, shocker, turns out fascist Russia and communist China deny the allegations. They claim that they're not testing nuclear weapons. So who can we believe here? Now, you might say, wouldn't it be easy to verify? Because we've got satellites that are constantly on the lookout for the double flash, right? Well, they'll be doing their tests underground. They're not going to be conducting their tests in the open atmosphere. That would be obvious. I mean, look at the Valence, and even in the 1970s, it was easy to detect a double flash with a satellite. You can't fake a double flash. There's literally no way to do the double flash effect with anything other than a nuclear bomb. It's not possible to And I'll explain what I mean by the double flash effect, which is that it's the case in every nuclear explosion, but you'll only see it in the huge ones where there's actually a time delay between the first flash of light and then the longer lasting second flash of light. And that's that initially there's the release of the light that comes out that it exits the detonation point at the speed of light and reaches the viewer. But then the actual material as it's expanding out gets to be, so like what's the term? It gets to be essentially so condensed and whatnot that it actually becomes opaque to light for a time, and then it is able to, dissipate, and then the light from the center exits, and then you see basically a double flash effect. And in an explosion like Hiroshima, that kind of size, Trinity, the time delay between the first flash and the second flash is like in the hundredths of a second. But with something like the Tsar Bomba, once you get up in like the 6 to 10 megaton range, then we're talking about a second time difference, right? Where it's actually noticeable. That's why when you see them, there's always that sort of flash and then it goes dark, like the huge ones. Not like what you're seeing on the screen right there, but that with the huge ones where they're like 10, 20 megatons sort of range that you can actually see in the footage, the time delay. You can't fake that with anything else. So if a satellite picks that up, you know that somebody's just tested a nuclear explosion. The thing is, they're not doing it above ground, they're doing it underground. So that rules out the satellite thing. So then you think, well, what about seismic testing and whatnot? The problem is that they'd be doing the testing that's so small that it would be imperceptible from, earthquakes or anything else. It's very low yield level, not anything like what you'd be seeing on the screen just underground, just very small to make sure that their stuff works. So if they're doing that, and you can say it's a conspiracy, I'm likely to believe it. I mean, what? Am I really going to trust Putin and Xi Jinping to abide by an agreement not to test nukes? Nah, I ain't going to do it. I ain't going to do it. Ain't going to do it. So I think Trump's right about that. I think that they are actually testing nukes. And they're getting the data and everything to fine-tune their weapons. I mean, Putin's been bragging about modernizing and expanding his nuclear arsenal, getting hypersonic delivery, that kind of stuff. Why does it make sense? Like, again, I've got a huge amount of disagreement with Trump. I'm somebody like if I had to pick between the two, I would go with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden opposes doing nuclear testing. But doesn't mean that on specific issues, Trump doesn't have a point. And on this point, if it's true that they're doing nuclear testing and they're getting that data to fine tune their arsenals, then why should America set that up? That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me at all. Because the arguments against doing it are that, well, if you do it, then the other countries will think, oh, well, what's stopping us from doing it? We're going to violate the agreement. Right. And that makes sense. Like if America's the first to do a nuclear test and the others are like, well, if America didn't do it, then why are we going to follow the test ban? So we're going to do it. I understand that. That makes sense. If they're already violating the test ban, why should America just be like, oh, well, we're going to stay in this deal? No, then it's a bad deal. It's rendered null and void at that point. So on that, Trump has a good point. Let's just keep it real. And now I know to a lot of people it kind of seems crazy. It's like, oh, you're talking about nukes. It's like, that's insane, bro. But it's like, yeah, but if they're actually doing testing of nukes, why would you want the good guys not to keep up? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And the only arguments that you have in that particular case, because like I said, there are good arguments against doing it. Those good arguments are if nobody else is doing it and you go and break the moratorium, then they'll do it too. And then things can spiral out of control, and you get you get a Nash equilibrium where you're basically in an arms race again. And that's not really desirable. But if they're already breaking the agreement, then that's not an argument against it. If anything, that's an argument for you to do the testing. You have to keep up and you have to stay ahead. And so it really depends on whether or not they're doing the testing. And I don't know. There's a chance the CIA doesn't even know. Let's just be real about that. There's a chance that they just don't know either. That nobody knows outside of the leadership in Beijing and Moscow, right? And whoever's at those facilities that they have, where they may or may not be doing the testing, and they have a lot of those facilities scattered around Siberia and China, right? So, but all I'm going to say, I don't know. All I'm going to say is that I don't trust those governments at all. Oh, they denied it. Yeah, Putin also denied going into Ukraine. Putin denied using weapons of mass destruction on British soil to kill Skripal and innocent civilians in the UK. Oh, it turned out that was true. He actually did that. Oh, it also turns out that he did invade Crimea and then later admitted to it. So you'll forgive me if if I'm a bit skeptical of Vladimir Putin's denial here, right? So that's Trump's case there. That's why Trump back in May was basically saying, maybe we should be doing this. And you might say, well, yeah, Trump is kind of soft on the Russians and everything, right? In many ways he is, but his rhetoric has been decent on it's been pretty good on China. And I think that Trump considers China to be a bigger threat to America than Russia. I mean, obviously, Trump has owed money to the Russians for a long time. They financed his golf courses after he had 6 bankruptcies and couldn't get a loan from anybody else. So you think that the Russians are stupid and thought that they were going to get their money back? No, they were buying influence by throwing their money into the furnace and giving it to Donald Trump on the odd chance that he ever somehow get power. And he got power. Isn't that kind of interesting? So kind of a good deal on their part. So I think that when it comes down to this, I mean, it's not just about collecting data. It's not just about, and it never was just about collecting data and verifying that your designs work and making sure that your arsenals are reliable and they'll work if you need them to work and tell them to go, right? If you need to get the nukes out the tubes, you want them to actually be able to get out the tubes. That kind of idea. You want it to actually detonate at a specific point in the air, and you want to verify all kinds of parameters around how our structure is going to withstand it. How can we civilian-proof houses? How can we measure the effects on, animals? That's one thing that they did. All kinds of stuff, right? In order to, on the one, try to make their stuff more effective against the enemy, and also try to harden and make buildings survive these things better. And the thing is, it's not just about all that. It's also about a show of force. Let's just be real there. That matters. And I can't think of a better way to show your enemies that you mean business than literally setting off a nuke, and filming it and being like, look, this is what we can do. Don't mess with us, essentially. That's part of what it's about. I mean, a lot of the old operations, when you look into them, they took a lot of preparation. They did a bunch of experiments and everything, but some of them, it'd just be like, oh, the Soviets have started nuclear testing again, another round of testing. Let's just go and get 30 and test them to show who's better, basically. It was just a response. It wasn't a pre-planned thing. A lot of the operations, they were testing various parameters and whatnot, but then also part of it was, well, the Soviets just tested one, so we're going to respond with it. So they just take a bomb out to the desert and set it off to be like, see, we can do a test too, basically. And in that sense, at that point, it's basically all just a show of force, right? But we're going to get into a bit more of the argumentation for why it would be a bad idea to do. So it was kind of incredible to really get the moratorium in the first place back after the 90s, because nuclear weapons tests in the US stopped in the 1990s. They've been testing nuclear weapons at the proving ground over in Nevada from the 1950s to the 1990s, so 40 years. But the world did basically agree to do the moratorium and just say stop testing. But there have been some notable exceptions, and that's come from North Korea. North Korea is doing nuclear testing. They did a nuclear test a few years ago. They're still nuclear. They're still doing their tests, and so now you can say, well, they're very far behind, and they're not really a real threat or anything. I would disagree with that. I would definitely disagree with that because they don't need to do 500 tests or 1,000 tests like the Soviets needed to do or the Americans needed to do back then, because a lot of that information they've already got their hands on. They've been working with Russian scientists to help build their rocket delivery systems, their mobile launchers. A lot of it has been done with the help of the Russians. So is it likely the Russians have also passed along a thing or two about, nuclear secrets and stuff? That's also probable. It's also probable. So they wouldn't have to do as many tests as the Russians had to do because the Russians can just give them the cheats, basically, the cheat sheet. So they've done a few nuclear tests. I think, what was it, 4? It might have been 5 that they've done. They don't need to do 700 to get a very, very potent arsenal. They probably only really realistically need to do about 20 or 30. So they're not interested in civilian defense, any of that kind of stuff. They only really need to verify different designs and make sure that they work and prove that they're reliable. And then, I mean, I'm telling you, North Korea is a massive threat, and nobody really talks about that too much. And they're building up nukes right now, and they're testing nukes right now, but America's still followed the moratorium on it. And so even if it turned out that the Trump administration's reasoning for considering lifting the nuclear test ban turned out to be on flawed premises, and it actually turned out that Russia and China weren't doing any nuclear tests, we know for a fact that North Korea is doing it. In fact, North Korea brags about it. They don't deny it like Putin. They come out there and put out TV propaganda being like, oh, the 6th nuclear test of the great leader sings the praise of Kim Il-sung, this kind of stuff, right? Like Mount Baekdu in the background, and they get like that old woman to come out and say like, our glorious bombs, and then they claim it's like a hydrogen bomb and stuff, even though it's not, that kind of thing, right? I mean, they brag about stuff before they even have it. That's North Korea. They're doing it. So now you could say, well, North Korea, it's nowhere near caught up to the U.S., so it's not a real concern. No, I think it is a concern. Now, that doesn't mean that you just start testing or anything there, but it also means that to say that Trump's logic there is 100% on false parameters, well, not really, because North Korea is an enemy too. So there is a problem here. Now, what are the pros to it? Well, what are some of the big pros to it? Well, one of them is that, and I've talked about this before, the reason why I would support doing 1 or 2 nuclear tests and filming it, like an actual atmospheric one, but obviously not very big. You want to limit radiation. You want to do it more of an airburst than some of the ones like the one that you're looking up on the screen, so you limit fallout, and you want to do it at a time when the winds are blowing in such a way that it's not going to cause any sort of fallout on any populated areas. But what you need to do is you need to do it, and you need to basically say, like, give a speech beforehand and say, look, the nukes aren't just for decoration. These things work. And if you screw around, we're not above using them. Even if you plan never to use them, you want your enemy to think that you would use them so that they stay on notice and they don't start screwing around, like how Putin's been screwing around, invading Georgia, invading Ukraine, meddling in elections in the Western Hemisphere. And now you might say, well, he didn't rig any votes in 2016, and that's true. But it's confirmed that they hacked into 30 states' voter registries, for example. That's unacceptable. They also meddled in the British election. They meddled in the French election. They've been meddling in German politics for a while now. I mean, Germany in particular is incredibly succumbed to Russian influence. This is a problem. This is a huge problem. And if you set off just a couple nukes and you televise it, and you say, like, this is a warning. This is what we can do if you keep screwing around and trying to undermine the free world, that kind of thing. It puts your enemies on notice. I mean, because right now you've got the Russians slamming into American military vehicles in Syria and filming it, uploading it to YouTube and laughing about it in basically real time. And we watched that footage on my stream a little while ago when the Russians, they purposefully smashed their vehicles into the Americans. They caused some injuries to U.S. soldiers too. And you're like, what? So they must think like America just doesn't mean business, right? They just feel that they could just bully America. Because there was a time when that would have been unthinkable. You'd be like, well, those guys, they have 20,000 nukes. What are you going to do? You're not going to do that. That's stupid. But Putin feels like, they wouldn't use it. So he doesn't really care. I'm not saying you use it. I'm just saying you have to make your enemy think you would be willing to use it. Otherwise, the deterrent isn't really a deterrent anymore. It's just decoration at that point. Really expensive decorations, but that's a problem nonetheless, right? So that's kind of my reasoning there. Now, here's an argument against it. Here's a good argument against it. Really good argument against it right now in this specific context. Do we really think that Trump really means business against business? And you're saying that you trust the KGB over the CIA, which Donald Trump admitted he believed back in the Helsinki summit a couple years ago. And then you go and set off a nuclear test to prove you mean business. Yeah, as you're saying that communist China has beautiful cake and that you wrote beautiful love letters to Chairman Kim of North Korea, and that you trust Putin over your own intelligence agencies. At that point, it kind of makes the world think you're not doing this to show that you mean business militarily. You're just doing it to stroke your own ego. And that's kind of a problem. It really kind of takes away from it. Now, imagine we had somebody who was hawk-pilled. Somebody like a Joe Lieberman figure, somebody like John McCain, somebody like Curtis LeMay, a Douglas MacArthur figure, or even Harry Truman, somebody like that in the White House. And they went and did a nuclear test. And they're like, this means business, right? You're going to look at that a little bit differently, because did those guys have big egos? Yeah. By the way, everybody has a big ego. Every single president, I've talked about this before, every single president has a big ego. You gotta be like, oh, he's got a big ego. Like, yeah, you can't become president without having a big ego. Do you know how hard it is to become president? I mean, out of what, like now it's 330 million people or whatever. You have to go through all the campaigning. You have to have half the country basically insulting you every day for years in the run up to the election. You have to have a really big ego to withstand that, keep going day to day and being like, I deserve to be president. It's just the way that the filter works is that if you didn't have a big ego, you would never make it there. That's the first step. That's the bottom level prerequisite. That's 101. So Curtis LeMay had a big ego. Douglas MacArthur had a big ego. Truman, big ego. Trump's got an extremely big ego. But it's not a bad thing for a leader to have a big ego, because, I mean, leaders have big egos unless they're like born into it, in which case then it can be flippy floppy, and sometimes you get a dud. Other times you get like a Peter the Great type figure, right? So sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get Queen Victoria. Other times you get like a Peter the Third who likes to play like toy soldiers and make the Russian soldiers wear German uniforms, and then a coup happens and that kind of stuff. That's not good. But when it comes to democracies, yeah, you're filtering out. You're only going to have people there that think that they're the top dog. And again, that's not a bad thing. If you're going into the world stage and it's anarchy on the world stage, you want your champion to believe in what they're doing. You want them to be confident. You don't want them to go out there and be like, oh, I'm sorry I offended you, and maybe we're the bad guys, bro, and that kind of stuff. No, you want them to be like, yeah, we're the best, and like, I'm the leader of the free world, listen to me, that kind of thing. That's what you want. So Nicholas right here, just looking at the chat, says any politician by definition has a big ego. See, that's the other thing. Even the ones that aren't president, even the ones that lose, even the ones that never even ran for president, even like local people that ran for Congress and lost probably have a huge ego compared to the average population. So you can imagine how big the ego is of the presidents that won. So, I mean, so that's not really an argument there to say, oh, well, it's just to stroke an ego or whatever. Every leader does things that stroke their ego. That's a given. The question is about, well, do they actually mean business and the optics of it? With Trump, I think it dilutes it. With China, it's a bit different. With Russia, I think it does dilute it. And again, I already said I don't think that they rigged the election or anything. There's no proof, there's no evidence or anything like that. Everything indicates that Trump won fair and square, but Putin did admit that he was supporting Trump. Every leader out there supports somebody for president. But Donald Trump's statements himself, talking about how he trusts the KGB over the CIA and how he trusts Putin over American intelligence, that really dilutes the force that him doing a nuclear test and saying that he means business might have, right? So that's an argument against it, and it's a good argument against it. So what have I done here? I've presented arguments that are good, arguments that are bad. I shouldn't say that. I think that they're both good, but there are negatives, there are pros and cons. There are arguments from both sides. I think a bad argument, though, would be, oh, he's just doing it to stroke his ego. I mean, it's a little bit of a better argument with Trump because Trump's just off the scale in terms of his ego. But again, every president has a big ego. Like, they're the president. It's like, even if they'd have to have a big ego to get there. But let's say if they didn't. Let's say they were like very humble and somehow managed to go through all the campaigning and have all the mud slung at them and continue on and still become president. Being the president would probably make them have a big ego. I mean, imagine being the president of the United States, what that would do to you. Like, you're the boss. You're the top dog of the most powerful superpower in the history of the world. Yeah, that would kind of enlarge your ego, right? So, and that's if you were humble to begin with. Donald Trump had a huge ego before he came into the White House. So it's kind of irrelevant. The question isn't whether or not it serves their ego or whatever. It's like, who cares? What matters is, does it serve the national security interests? And will it make the world a better place, more stable, right? Because this idea that the Russians don't fear America has made the world very unstable. They did fear America when America was dead serious about using the nukes, right? That's when there was a very credible deterrent. And you'd say, well, you don't need to test nukes to prove that you could use them. That's a bit of a worse argument. I really do believe that even with the best computer modeling that we have available today, it's been almost 30 years since there was an actual test to verify the data. I mean, every now and then you really do need to calibrate your parameters. And like, I'm not a scientist or anything with that. I'm not somebody that works in that industry or anything. It'd be interesting to sit down with somebody who does. And I'm sure that there are computer scientists and modeling experts out there that would say, well, this isn't the 1960s anymore. The models are credible. But again, I've seen the models screw up on other things like global warming with over predictions, with nuclear winter, where, oh, you inputted the wrong parameters and it makes it look like the end of the world when in reality it's kind of a meme, that kind of stuff. And so all I'm saying here is just that with something as monumentally important as the nuclear deterrent, you kind of want to make sure that it's still reliable. And I don't think that computer modeling is good enough. I think you have to do testing. Now, you could say do it underground, right? Because you used to do it underground. I get that. You still collect your data and everything. That works. But the show of force thing, yeah, testing a nuke underground is still a show of force, but I'm going to argue here. I don't think Trump wanted to do a military parade, all this kind of stuff. I don't think anything is as big a show of force as setting off a nuke in the atmosphere as a test. Now, they probably wouldn't do it in Nevada. They'd probably do it somewhere in the Pacific, very remote, with no chance of exposing anybody to radiation. But if they did do it in Nevada and kept it at a low yield such that it wasn't going to put any fallout anywhere, Can you imagine how spectacular that would be? Because you could literally go and watch it. Like, they're not going to let you on the test site or anything. They never let people on the test site. But it's a nuke. Las Vegas is 100 kilometers away. They could see the nukes go off back in the 1950s and 1960s. And we're going to get into a bit of story time pretty soon here. Go through, a bit of how that worked and everything, and just the spectacle of it, and what it could be like if Trump actually did lift the nuclear test ban. And I'm going to make the point here that I'm not saying you do like 700 or 900 tests over like 30 years or whatever, but one or two just to verify some designs, because I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure that they've got some new designs, like some of the new B-61 stuff that they never got a chance to test in real life. They've only tested with computer modeling, and you verify that. I mean, that would be spectacular. That would be spectacular, because the last time that the United States set a nuke off above ground was in 1963, and we all know what the video quality looked like in 1963. Can you imagine 4K resolution? Like, even just a low yield one, like 10 to 20 kilotons or like 8 kilotons, what that would look like with our technology now. Just imagine how spectacular that would look. And again, you could see it in real life. And it got to the point where it wasn't just about the military. It wasn't just about a show of force. It wasn't just about stroking the leader's ego. It wasn't just about sticking it to the Soviets. It actually became an economic stimulus to Nevada, and in particular Las Vegas. There was atomic tourism that became a big thing back in the 1950s, where they realized, hey man, we could cash in on this, and so they would actually announce when they were going to be doing the testing. So people would just get in their RV, drive over to Sin City, and spend the night. And they would have like hotels with packages where you could stay up, party, and then watch the nukes go off in the morning. They would usually set them off like around 6 a.m., that sort of thing, and they could see it. They're like 100 kilometers away from the testing ground. This actual picture right here is a lot closer than that. That was some of the personnel watching one of these go off on the Yucca Flats in the distance. Again, this is what the actual picture quality looked like. This is just with the neocon wave filters that I've been using. I think it looks pretty cool, but we do have an active chat tonight, though, and I'll say that, and I appreciate the active chat, and I do now and then, though, monitor the chat just to make sure that nobody's spamming anything, because like I said, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're just going to start randomly spamming stuff and clutter everything for everybody who's here to actually get something out of the stream, you're getting timed out. That's just how it works. So, and I had to do that last night, and I don't like to do it, but you have to do it. So you hate to see it, but it has to happen. So I have a picture here. This is from the Smithsonian. This is of what one of the tests looked like from Las Vegas. You'd see right there the after effects of one of the plumes, totally visible. And so people would just like kind of camp out, hang out, and whatnot, and watch this stuff go off, and make like a big party of it and everything. And a lot of businesses would advertise like, come and watch the bombs go off at our place and everything. And it was kind of a spectacle. I mean, I'm kind of fascinated that whole thing actually happened for, about a decade, where you could just go and like just drive down to Las Vegas, watch some nukes go off, and make a vacation of it. It's kind of surreal. I mean, that's probably never going to happen again. But Trump was, and possibly still is, considering bringing it back. And I wonder to what extent. And I wonder if it would be announced beforehand. And, Trump is such a showman, he probably would do it beforehand. He's such a showman, he would probably do it beforehand. and do it above ground. Like because here's the thing about Trump. He likes ratings. What would get better ratings than this, except in 4K? Like there's nothing. Like there's nothing. That would be the biggest spectacle to hit American television since like I mean we're talking. I mean it would be huge, literally, right? So basically this what year was this from? This one was from, do I still have that picture? Oh yeah, it just says between 1950 and 1960, but the actual particular year doesn't matter so much because they basically made a tourism thing of it for about a decade or so. So yeah, we went over Trump's considerations. I do want to ask the chat though. Now, I did say we were going to be taking a break from the chat once I go into a bit of the the background of the Nevada test site. But I'll take questions. Do you guys think that it would be smart for Trump to do it? Do you think it would be an effective show of force? Do you think that it would sort of inspire the fear of America in the enemies of freedom, or do you think it wouldn't be anything more than just kind of like a show, kind of a meme? How do you think it would go? And even if that was so, would you still think that it should go ahead, or would you say, nah, don't do it? And what's your reasoning there? So we'll take a look at what what the audience has to say about this. But Nicholas says, nukes are still a fringe subject. So if Trump's going to test, I hope he does it before the election. I think it would take a decent amount of planning, and honestly, I'd be kind of disappointed if it happens before the election because like COVID is a thing right now, and you can't just like get up and go and like drive down to Las Vegas or whatever. Like I live in Canada, but if he does it at some point after COVID's over and they do announce it, like you bet it. Like I'm gonna drive down to Las Vegas and do the same thing. I mean that would be crazy. And so like thousands of people, well tens of thousands of people would just go hang out. They'd announce when everything was going off, and then everybody gets their goggles out, watches it go off, and then goes about their day and whatnot. I mean, again, like. These pictures probably, I mean, they certainly don't do justice to this. I mean, you take a picture of like a beautiful sunset or something on your phone, and then you look at how the image turned out. Even on an iPhone 11, even with something with amazing mobile photography. I mean, we're just talking like basic phones here, but still nonetheless impressive technology, and it looks like crap. I mean, we can get really good footage and everything and good pictures from really high caliber stuff that costs thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars today. But even then, it's still not really doing proper justice to the real world. And so let's see. We'll take a look at the responses. So Terra Nova says there is only winning. Mexicanator says, I would love if Trump did it. Peace through strength. See, like peace through strength used to be the doctrine. That used to be understood. It used to be that if you were weak, if your enemies thought you were weak, you were never going to have peace because they would take advantage of you. But if they thought you were strong, you could get not a meaningful peace, but an efficient peace, a peace that's better than the alternative in the world. Mexicanator says, I live here in Las Vegas. Yeah, so you wouldn't have to drive anywhere. That's crazy. You probably already know like the history and stuff we're going to go into because it's kind of a meme. But it's kind of a meme that not very many people really know too much about, I guess, unless like if you grew up in the city or if you live in the city, you probably know the history and stuff. But Pro Thing says when Bernie gets into power with a junta, he won't be too nice to all CIA funded channels. See, I love that. I love how like we're a CIA funded channel, but like I'm streaming on a really old laptop right now. Well, we almost have the new computer going up. We almost have the new computer up right now. And I love how Son of Cyrus offset it about 10% of the cost just last night. I mean, that's amazing. Again, huge thank you to Son of Cyrus right there, because I had to drop a lot of money on getting a new computer system going on. But with the patrons, the PayPal gang, everybody that's been supporting the channel, we're up to like $600 offset of the cost. About $1,600 or so that I had to put into everything here, and we just had the last of the equipment and stuff arrive today. So we'll be getting that stuff set up, and we'll be back to streaming, with my face and everything. But this is a stream where it doesn't matter, because you just got pictures, we got argumentation, we got the chat gang, and now the pictures are more spectacular than anything I'm going to have set up in my studio, right? I mean, again, look, dude, it's a literal nuclear explosion. It doesn't get more spectacular than that. Nicholas says, once the vaccine comes, it'll be a slow but sure reemergence. I don't know when operations like this will be cleared. ProThink says also that he wanted to dissimulate. Dude, you really need to learn how to spell, dude. I guess that's your shtick for that particular stock account, but come on, man. Oh, man. Terra Nova says, can Trump nuke a hurricane? Yeah, hurricanes are like so much exceedingly more powerful than nukes. They make the power of a nuke vanishingly insignificant in comparison. Even a big nuke like the Star Bomber. Nicholas says, Trump avatar spewing fake news. Surprise, surprise. I like this one, ProThing. Just because your life sucks doesn't mean Kevin works for the CIA. But like at the same time, wouldn't it be kind of cool if I did work for the CIA? Just saying, it would be kind of cool. I like how that's an insult. Like, you work for the CIA. It's like, yeah, actually, it's kind of hard to get hired by the CIA. But Kakagudava asks, any thoughts on Russia coming out with its own vaccine? That's fake news. There's no way Russia's going to have an effective vaccine against COVID. Russia's vaccine against COVID is going to be as good as the Chinese donated medical supplies to Italy. What do I mean by that? Oh, it turns out 80% wasn't actually donated. They had to pay for it. And it was expired or broke right away. That's what I mean by it. Wyatt says, man, I lost my job at Starbucks for stealing. Damn the CIA. Oh, yeah, blame the CIA on everything. If a wildfire starts because some lightning strikes and, there's kindling on the ground and it hasn't rained in a little while. CIA, that was a no good CIA neocon Google move. They must have used the HARP thing to mess with the weather, bro, and start a fire. Because lightning, it has never been a thing before. That kind of stuff. Well, I think that's about all the responses that we got to the questions, or the question that I posed about if you think it makes sense. It seems to be that the consensus here is that Trump should go ahead and do it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's crazy. That's just Trump being absolutely insane. But I'm like, let's just step back and imagine with something like John McCain or Curtis LeMay or Douglas MacArthur, and they weren't weak on the Russians, and they suggested this. How would we feel about it? We'd probably be like, yeah, that's going to show that you do mean strength, right? So the diluting factor here is that it's Trump. That doesn't mean that it's not in and of itself a smart idea. But like I said, there are downsides to it. Like, let's say it turned out that the Russians and Chinese were honest and they weren't doing any low yield testing and gathering data. Then you've gone and violated the moratorium. And now 100% they're going to do the same thing. They're going to do the same thing. So you've just guaranteed that they're doing the testing. But again, Trump's saying that they're doing it already. So I don't know either way. All I can say is that if he's right, that you should do it. And if he's wrong, well, that makes it a little bit more complicated, because it doesn't necessarily even mean that you don't do it. It's just, it's not as much a clear-cut case. So there are good arguments against it. But we don't know. We might never know, right? So, and like I said, there's a chance the CIA doesn't even know. It's not like the CIA knows every Russian secret or every Chinese secret. It'd be awesome if they did, but Orkettle says, gotta go, Kevin. We'll chat later. Yeah, so So I'm going to take a brief break here. We'll have a little bit of an intermission. We'll put up something else to have on the screen while I'm away. Let's see. We'll go with. Yeah, we'll have this one here. And once I take this one off the screen, I'll be back. So I'll be back in about a minute or so. So stay tuned and thanks for being here. We still got 10 people here and it's pretty late right now. So that's pretty cool. I'm back, ghouls. How's everybody doing? Oh, and I see there are 14 new comments. So we'll take a look at those and then we'll get into the remainder of the stream. So let's see what everybody's got to say. Arthur says, "We bring the storm." You know, we got some trolls in chat, of course. 9/11 conspiracy theories. Oh, that's fun. Terra Nova says CNN is a giant op. Like, I'm not a fan of CNN. I make fun of CNN all the time. They're like, you know, they're always neutral. They never take a stance on anything. It's pretty cringe. So Oh, I know. So yes, so when it comes down to it, this has happened in the past. Like I said before, the end of 1963, the United States had been doing atmospheric testing in Nevada, as well as elsewhere, like in the Pacific. But Nevada, in particular, because of course there's a city 100 kilometers away, and again, that's what it would look like soon after the actual blast. So people could see what they were doing. And but yeah, that's cool. So yeah, there we are. So get into a bit of the Nevada proving grounds and the atomic tourism and all that kind of stuff. So and we'll see, and then we'll wrap it up with our end and what our recommendation for Trump would be if he should actually go through with this or not. But moving on to the to more like the story time part of the stream, because we always do foreign policy and we talk about the news and everything, but I like history too. The history of this stuff is kind of cool. This kind of this could come back around. We don't know, but it's very likely. I won't say. A lot of people are going to say, well, Kevin, Joe Biden's up 8 points. Joe Biden's going to be president. Donald Trump's not going to do the nuclear test. He's going to be out in a few months. Yeah, but the people that are like too busy or too lazy to fill out political surveys, that kind of stuff, the people that are more likely to lie about who they feel that they're going to vote for, they're more likely to support Trump. I'm skeptical that it's that high. And even if it is that high, all that matters is the performance in swing states. It's usually closer there. I think Trump has about a third chance of like a 35% or so chance of winning the election. I don't think it's like a done deal. I don't think it's like, he's got no chance, bro. It's going to be Joe Biden. I don't think so. I know it's not going to be anywhere near as close in the polling in the run up here as it was between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Joe Biden is just a far more likable guy than Hillary Clinton was a likable woman. That's just the reality of the matter. But I'm just saying, don't write off Trump yet. Just don't write off Trump. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to be shocked if he wins. I mean, like, it was a 1 in 3 chance, and it turned out you rolled 1 in 3. It's like, okay, that's a possibility. That's one of the options available. Not really surprising. It's more likely that Joe Biden wins, but Terra Nova says, are you still confident about Biden? Well, I guess that was about a minute ago or so. So I might have already answered that, but I think about a 65% chance for Biden. So Nicholas says, Kevin, as you yourself say, the polls were right in 2016, and Biden does not have the baggage that Clinton did. Yeah, but in 2016, it was basically a 50-50, right? Here, it's about a 35-65 for Biden's favor. Because the polls in 2016, they were close, up about 3 points for Clinton. She did win about 3 points, but again, it mattered in the swing states. 70,000 votes is like margin of error. That's like a 50-50. That's a toss-up, basically. So Trump won. That's not really surprising. But I'm just saying it's still possible. Trump still has paths to victory. That's the thing. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that he has paths to victory that are not completely implausible. So Terra Nova asks, is Biden or Clinton a stronger candidate? He says, ask yourself. Nicholas answers, Biden stronger candidate, Clinton better politician. I think Clinton's better on foreign policy these days. Joe Biden was pretty base back in the 90s. Joe Biden's a much better candidate, though, than Hillary Clinton was. So Nicholas says, yeah, they could give Biden a 99.99% chance, and I'd still brace myself. Arthur says Trump can barely get through a pre-written speech, but I think a lot of people would still vote for Trump simply to own the libs. For sure. Like, it's a democracy, he could win. He could seriously win. So if he does win, and we already know Biden's stance, Biden's against doing this. Biden's against lifting the test ban. He's against lifting the moratorium. Now, if I was Biden, I'd be a little bit more nuanced about it. I understand you want to be like Trump bad and whatnot, and you have to oppose Trump. But I'd say, look, if we know the Russians are doing it and the Chinese are doing it, we're we didn't start the fire. We're gonna join in. We have to keep up. That would be a more reasonable response. But if Donald Trump does win, he decides to go ahead with this at some point in the next 4 years. I mean, again, that would be pretty spectacular. And he's the kind of guy that would give everybody notice of when it was going to happen. And so we would have a revival of like that atomic tourism fervor from the 1950s and 1960s. And that would be pretty crazy. That would be pretty crazy. You'd have like a lot of YouTube people and stuff showing up, as close as you can get to the testing grounds, probably like 70 kilometers to 100 kilometers away, as far back as like Las Vegas. Watching this would be crazy. I mean, it would be like the biggest show of the year. Who doesn't, like, in 4K resolution too? Who doesn't want to see what a nuke looks like in 4K resolution? Yeah. I think I don't know. If it was anybody other than Trump, it would definitely 100% be a clear show of force. It's just with Trump, if he didn't have all that rhetoric and whatnot and baggage when it comes to the Russians, but even still against China and against North Korea, I still think, Trump's the kind of guy that if he did get tough on North Korea again, I mean, he has had good rhetoric on North Korea in the past. He used to talk about fire and fury if they screwed around, that kind of stuff. And then he fell in love, and it was so tragic. It was so tragic because he was right on the money for quite a bit of his administration. And then he met Kim, and he was like, "Oh, you have swag. You have a yacht. Your people do whatever you tell them to. That's kind of cool." And he fell in love with a communist. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. I mean, his supporters, they say they hate communism, but here he is hanging out with a communist and writing beautiful love letters like FDR to a communist dictator. That's kind of gross. He's like the FDR of our generation in that sense. But Kaka Kadava asks, Kevin, any plans to make a video about the current situation in Libya? It is turning out to be a real proxy war. Well, I'd be down to talk with somebody like Anthony Roberto or even Anthony Avistubi-Son if he's down to come on at some point and talk about it on stream. I haven't talked about that in a little while. I think it would be interesting for sure. I mean, it's basically Russia versus Turkey in terms of how this is going down. And, with the West being aligned with Turkey and Russia and Haftar and whatnot and everything, it's a mess. It's a total mess. And it's proof positive of why you really need to stay the course with nation building, because if you pull out prematurely, nothing good is going to come from that. You have to commit to the intervention is the lesson of Libya. So yeah, I had mentioned that the picture that you're seeing on the screen is from 1957 with some neocon wave filter flare added to it. So that was a regular occurrence for a long time in the deserts of the Nevada Proving Ground. This one's on the Yucca Flats, about 100 kilometers northwest of Las Vegas. And so that happened. And they would do this, and they would have a schedule basically announced for when they were going to be setting these things off, and just civilians would be able to watch this from a distance. Kind of an insane time. Like, that's wild. that's wild that this kind of thing happened. I mean, that for a decade you would just have this tourist attraction where the military would be doing tests and everybody could go and watch from a distance, and go and party in Las Vegas and like listen to like Sinatra and stuff, and then go and watch some bombs go off. I mean, that's kind of crazy, but yeah, that was a different time. That was a different time, and Trump, like I said, Trump might actually bring it back, and so it's, but we do have an active chat. We do have an active chat, and so I appreciate that. Lots of comments. So. But yeah, we'll get into a little bit more of the background of some of the culture and the iconography and everything of that era, just the exuberance of that time. So, so for me, like I did actually create a music channel, by the way. I haven't uploaded anything to it, and at this rate, probably not going to be uploading anything to that for a while until I'm able to do my political show as more of like a full-time gig. Then I can focus on other projects. I'm just too busy right now. But I listen to a lot of music. I listen to a lot of music. I mean, I listen to like over 3,000 albums released since 2010, for example, in the last decade. So, listen to a lot of music, a lot of great albums, a lot of great albums. So I'm going to be doing some detailed reviews on, new albums and some albums that really appeal to me, on that channel, just as a hobby and everything, right? I mean, obviously the political channel here is still going to be the focus of Superpower Media, but yeah, I listen to a lot of music. Not as much as I used to, mind you. I mean, my average has definitely gone down big time since I started streaming every day, working all the time, that kind of stuff. You don't quite have as much time to listen to as much music and everything. But we got Mexicanator here. He says, I got to go. Going to bed, Kevin. Good night. Well, good night, Mexicanator. Good to talk to you. Thanks for being here. You can check out the rest of the stream later if you get the chance. So. We got the trolls fuming and dooming in the chat, begging for attention. That's always fun. That's always fun. But I was gonna say though, one of my favorite bands actually, like even going back to like when I was a kid and everything, is the Killers, right? And if you listen to like the Killers' Hot Fuzz, for example, I mean that's a classic. That's a classic. That's one of I mean. It could be conceivably a stretch to say one of the best albums of this century so far. I mean, because like I said, I mean that we're talking at least from albums that I've listened to, well over 3,000 since 2000. But it's a good album. It's a pretty good album, and of course, the main single from that one, Mr. Brightside, that one was big. That one was huge and everything. They actually did about 8 years ago a sequel to that one called Miss Atomic Bomb, and you think about that and you're like, oh well, this is like what? This is like a metaphor for like how like this woman has like an explosive effect on his life and all this and whatnot. And then you're like, but you actually look into the history of it, it's like, no, that was actually a real person. That was actually a real person. It became such a cultural phenomenon in Las Vegas, for example, that they had beauty pageants, like Miss Atomic and stuff, and that was really a thing. And some of this is just surreal. I mean, some of the iconography from that era is just it's. I mean, surreal is a good term. This is. I mean, if you check out the video and everything, a pretty beautiful video, sad song for sure. Really good instrumentation. That's a little clip from or screenshot from the video itself, Miss Atomic Bomb by the Killers. But but she was a real woman. This is Lee Merlin in 1957. They actually had a beauty pageant and everything. And another reason why I bring this up is because Trump, he's pretty big on beauty pageants. He's pretty big on that. He always talks about the whole Miss America thing, and I mean, that didn't he like used to own that or something? I know he's had a bunch of businesses, but that was one of his things. He's like this showman. He's into like the beauty pageants. He's into the reality TV shows and everything. Look, I could totally see Trump being down with this kind of stuff if he knew a bit about his history and everything. But that was her there. She actually won the pageant. She was crowned the last Miss Atomic Bomb in 1957 during the Operation Plume Bob. And Operation Plume Bob, there's some spectacular shots from that. We'll get into that. This is kind of a taste of what it could be like if Trump brings this back. But that's her there, and there isn't really that much information even available about her or anything. This whole thing just kind of happened, and then just kind of went into the history books and whatnot. But I find that kind of iconic and surreal. So just that picture right there, that's kind of crazy. You know, you got like this model, and she's posing, and of course she's wearing a mushroom cloud. It's kind of a big meme. It's kind of a potent meme. But take a look at the chat. Not too much activity in the chat, but we'll talk about Operation Plume Bob. So Operation Plume Bob had it started in May 28th through October 7th, 1957 at the Nevada test site. And it was the biggest, longest, and most controversial test series in the continental United States. So this was really like the kind of culmination of the nuclear testing era in American history. Now, of course, the Soviets had a lot of tests going on too, but Kaka Kadava says Trump used to bang some of his beauty pageant contestants. He's such a creep. Well, it depends if they're over 18 or not. Like then there's not really an issue. But I mean, Trump is the kind of guy. Like, here's the other thing about Trump. Like, we can talk about him as a showman. We can talk about him as somebody who's for the memes. We can talk about him as somebody who cares about the ratings. You can also kind of talk about them as or you can talk about him as kind of a creeper. I'll never forget what he said about Jeffrey Epstein. Like, because there's a whole bunch of memes around Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, confirmed pedophile, right? What did he say about Jeffrey Epstein, his friend at the time? Well, he said, yeah, here's the thing about Jeff. He likes his girls, and he likes them really young. And you're listening to this, and you're like, wait, does he know? Does he know? What? What do you mean? And then you couple it with the fact that Donald Trump said about Ivanka Trump that if Ivanka Trump was not his daughter, that he'd be dating her. Dude, who says that? Like, what? Like, here's the thing. I'm not a fan of Trump. But it doesn't mean that Trump doesn't make the right choice now and then. And I think that there's a pretty good case that you can make to bring back the nuclear testing, especially when the Russians are running roughshod. And mind you, there is another point to be made there, just to get this across. Even if it's true that the Russians aren't doing nuclear tests in secret, that they are telling the truth, they already don't think that American nuclear deterrent really means anything. And so resuming the testing, it's not really going to destabilize anything, because the world is already as unstable as I wouldn't say it's possible. I mean, it can be worse, but the Russians already have no respect for America. Could it really hurt to do a nuclear test? I mean, I'm just saying. And again, it sucks that it's Trump, because, well, it could have been somebody else that would be a lot stronger in their rhetoric against Russia. But I mean, at least with China, it could be a decent display of force. But Operation Plume Bob, though, that there were some really just amazing, spectacular shots from this. So this is obviously black and white. This is the Priscilla shot that they did right there. That looks kind of crazy. I put some filters over it to kind of highlight it and everything. That's Plume Bob Priscilla right there. We got some neocon wave aesthetics going on with that. So that's kind of cool. This one's Fizzo. That's insane. And so you look at the actual quality of the film and everything, and you're like, oh, I mean, it's spectacular, but it's also kind of old film. Imagine this all in 4K. Like, I'm just saying. I mean, there is something to be said there just about the spectacle of it all. So, I mean, we've got Oh man, we've got a very obsessive troll here tonight for sure. He wants to have a debate with me. He wants to argue with me, but he won't do it on stream. That's what's funny about it. So it's like, debate me, bro. I'm like, okay, let's come on. He's like, no. Okay, that's cool. Nicholas says he knows he can't have Ivanka, so he's looking for consolation prizes. Yeah, I mean that's a big yikes, but I mean that's the thing about Trump. So, oh man. Pro Thing says I will. Terra Nova says do it. Pro Thing says I will do it on stream. Yeah, no, it literally was earlier. I was like, dude, come on stream. He's like, no. If we do a debate on stream, it's already getting kind of late, so it won't be tonight. And also, we're not going to do it on this video because this video is dedicated to Trump considering doing the nuclear tests again. So it brings up another question, which is that how many should he even do? Should he do one? Should he do two? Should he do it to like, to the level that the science and that the reliability test would require? Because that might be dozens. Who knows? There might be another round of an Operation Plum Bomb type scenario. Who knows? Again, they tested stuff like this. They had this. Obviously, this one here. I believe this one here is. I think it was the Priscilla shot from a distance. Not 100% sure on that. It didn't actually give any description of what they were looking at, but similar area, similar yield, that kind of thing. But again, you would be able to see it from Las Vegas. That's the thing that's crazy about it. Like you literally just drive there and watch the tests go off. And so Donald Trump did announce it. You probably see like a huge spectacle, just like thousands, tens of thousands of people gathering around the area to go and watch these things, like YouTubers and stuff doing vlogs, just being like, okay, so we're going to go and watch the nuke go off today. It's going to be hype, as if it's like a music festival or something, right? I mean, that would be kind of amazing. But if he does do it, it'd probably be underground. Well, the military would probably want to do it underground and everything. I'm just saying, I mean, the biggest show of force, the biggest spectacle possible is an atmospheric nuclear test. So, and Donald Trump, he's the kind of guy. He's the kind of guy that would probably want it to be atmospheric. So that's the thing where it is possible, where you could actually be like, oh, it's like it's 1957 again. I mean, obviously the cars would be newer and everything, but I mean, the physics and stuff is basically the same. But Dave Rubin. Oh, that's pretty crazy, guys. We have a celebrity here tonight. Dave Rubin. Do you support military intervention in 1979 to counter the Islamic Revolution? Of course. Or he says, would you? Of course. Are you a fan of the Shah? Or not the Shah, the Ayatollah? Because the Shah was better than the Ayatollah. He was a loyal American ally. He was a bulwark against communism. Arthur says, Dave Rubin, agree with me. Terra Nova says, the only thing Kevin should debate is foreign policy. Dude, that's like Liz logic, where she thought like, hey, I don't really know anything about foreign policy, so like, let's not go there, even though I just went there asking about North Korea. But she knew so little about foreign policy, she didn't realize that North Korea was a part of foreign policy, which is just mind-numbingly dumb. But it is Netta Liz we were talking about. And she admitted this on her stream that was her strategy, like a gotcha. Like, can't talk about your forte. Now let's focus on what I'm good at. So let's talk about like debt and stuff and also North Korea. Except I could debate economics. I can debate all that stuff. So Terra Nova asks, are you confident about your domestics? Yeah, like where are we talking about? Where are we talking about? Like I've debated like the whole race thing in the past. I've debated some economic issues. debated about Antifa, debated about labeling Antifa and BLM as a terrorist organization, that kind of stuff. Nicholas says Liz was trying the Trump strategy. Yeah, and it didn't work out for her. Terra Nova asks, abortion. What's your stance on abortion? My stance on abortion is that it should be legal, but probably try to limit it. It should be safe but rare. That's kind of the idea with abortion. So. But I will ask before we kind of close this, because, well, that's not true. That's not true. There was another thing. That's right. I was only looking at my my picture inventory here, but I have video clips. I have a couple of video clips we're going to watch of what the plume bob exercises were like. So the first one is a 1-minute compilation by Adam Central showing some of the various tests that they did and the footage. And again, imagine these in 4K now. So 4K resolution. So here we go. Yeah, so that's the first video clip. Some of those are spectacular already, and you're like that's with like 1957's camera tech. Again, imagine 4K. So next is an amazing demonstration that they did. This was for public relations to kind of show the public what they were up to and whatnot. And so I'm not making this up. This isn't fake news. They actually did this. They got four Air Force guys to stand underneath a nuclear bomb right as it was going off above them. And the bomb was set off about, the video say 10,000 feet above them. That's not true. It was closer to about 18,000 feet above them. But it was a 2 kiloton yield. And they were perfectly fine, right? Like, it was to try to demonstrate that, like, you could literally stand under one of these things in the air and it wouldn't cause any damage or anything. And they all lived to be really old too. That's the other thing, is like the last of them died in 2014, but they all lived to be like 70, 80, that kind of thing. But these are these guys. This is insane. Like, would you stand underneath one of these 20,000 feet above your head? Here it is. So. Oh yeah, five men, because they had a cameraman.
8 minus 1 minute. The airplane is up over our shoulders. It is a bright silver spot in the sky.
Turn it on, I'm going to look away and then I'll find it again.
30
there,
seconds.
I got him.
John sees it. 25 seconds.
Look away and then look back and you'll see it easy.
20 seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. There it goes. The rocket is gone. We felt a heat pulse a very bright light, a fireball. It is red. The sky looks black about it. It is boiling above us there. It is rapidly losing its color. There is the ground wave. It is over, folks. It will happen. The mountains are vibrating. It is tremendous. Directly above our heads. It went. It went. Good. And there's a huge fireball. The mountains are still echoing through here. Worse than that, a perfect shot.
My only regrets right now are, this Colonel Bruce, that everybody couldn't have been out here at Ground Zero with us. Okay, Bodie.
We can still see it's a very odd cloud. It is white in the center, and there's a bright orange ring towards the outside of it. Then below it, there's like a hazy cloud. I don't know, Colonel Bruce. I've never quite seen a cloud like this from atomic detonation. Have you?
No, I haven't, Bodie. There seems to be quite a halo connected with it, and there's quite a bit of mist up there. I'm not, this is new to me.
Maybe from seeing it from Ground Zero, we're missing a mushroom, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of a mushroom type of stem that we have associated with other detonations. Folks, it was just a wonderful thrill to see that interceptor come in, that rocket go at the zero count. This thing went off with a white flash. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, oops. I'm pretty sure there was an echo there on most of that. I forgot to turn my mic on mute, so you were hearing the mic picking that up coming from my laptop. Unfortunately, classic boomer rookie mistake right there. So that's happened once in the past before too. So you'd have to work on that. But pretty amazing footage though. So that's the kind of stuff that they got up to in Operation Plume Bob. And yeah, so Trump might bring it back. And like I said, stories from a few months ago. We'll see if anything materializes from this. But it is Trump. Like, anything is possible. You never know. So, and one thing that I think that's very likely is that the Russians and the Chinese, they're lying. They're totally lying. Like, dude, there's no way. Oh, Putin's going to be like, oh, let's just abide by the moratorium because, like, the Americans are abiding by it. There's no way. It's Putin. The guy invaded Georgia. The guy started the first war in Europe of this century to try to take territory for himself. Does anybody trust this guy? Well, Donald Trump said they trusted him over the CIA, which is absurd, but I mean, wow. But you never know. Because look, it is Trump. He also hired John Bolton, so it can go either way. Because I give him a lot of credit just for hiring John Bolton. That took a lot of moves on his part, a lot of will on his part. Because a lot of his fan base is like, John Bolton, he's a ghoul. I'll see if I have the John Bolton memes in here yet. No, I still gotta load the John Bolton ones, but yeah, John Bolton's a ghoul for sure. So, oh yeah, and Trump also started the Space Force. That's another thing. Like, the guy who starts the Space Force, would he bring back nuclear testing? Maybe. You never know. So anything's possible, but that's a little bit of his reasoning, some arguments for it, some arguments against it, a bit of the history of the nuclear testing in the United States, some of the cultural angle of it. And, we'll close here by asking, if he does bring it back and they do, announce the schedule and everything, would you go to Las Vegas and watch that? Because that's kind of a once in a lifetime thing to like see a nuke go off, right? So, I mean, back in the 50s, 60s, you could do it hundreds of times, but now, obviously, it's been underground since 1963. So I don't really have too much else to add. So, of course, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow me over on Twitch. You can, of course, support me over on Patreon. If you like what I do, you enjoy the streams, you want to keep them going, because it's the Patreon gang that powers these daily streams. And if you want to send your boy a tip, that's always welcome. So, I mean, Son of Cyrus is really, outdone himself there with that. Absolutely generous and based hawk for sure. So, I like how we do have, last I checked, we had 3 dislikes on this already. I guess those are like the haters. Now we got 10 likes and 3 dislikes. That's always fun. Always fun. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but YouTube, the algorithm gods, they don't actually care if you like or dislike. They just care that you reacted to something. So whether you were fuming and dooming or you were cold and bold winner like John Bolton and liking this, YouTube is like, hey man, people reacted to it. So helps out me either way. So I take all the Nick Fuentes fans when they dislike me, I take it as a badge of honor. I'm like, oh, Nick Fuentes fanboys, they don't like me. I must be doing something right. So, well, I guess Mexicanator, he's not here right now because he had to go to bed, but he'd probably go. He lives there. He said he lives in Las Vegas, so he'd probably go. So, I mean, he could see it from his house probably, or at least the roof of his house, depending on like mountains and stuff. But yeah, so this closes the triple threat, the 3 nuke streams we're going to do for this week. We're going to resume our regular sort of programming with guests and news stories and Pro Thing says it's almost 2 where I live. And yeah, same here, almost 2 a.m. So, but yeah, we're going to go back to the regular superpower broadcasting where it's not just me talking, not just story time, not just me ranting, that kind of stuff for the remainder of the week for sure. And we'll see. I mean, it's superpower broadcasting. We'll probably get like the boys like Jay and some of the other Hawks on and watch some like old test footage again at some point in the future. That was fun. But Pro Thing says DM when I can debate you. Is your grammar and speech as bad as this in actual like conversation? Because you sound like you're 12, bro. 2 o'clock gang. Yeah, Arthur's on the same time zone. 2 o'clock gang. But yeah, thanks for being here to the friends and fans, and yeah, even the trolls, the haters and traitors. It's always fun. You guys are kind of a bunch of goofballs, but it's cool watching you guys fuming and dooming. Yeah, we're all West Coast. So yeah, I'll be back tomorrow, of course, like I said. And we'll probably bring on some guests and stuff, talk about some other stuff. Maybe we'll do the Libya stream. Who knows? But for that one, I definitely want to talk with Anthony Roberto because he's super knowledgeable in that region and specifically the Libyan civil war. So, Terra Nova says, "Have a good night, Kevin." Yeah, have a good night, Terra Nova. So, good talking with you. See you later. So, I'll be back tomorrow, and have a good night, everybody. Peace.